the worst thing that has happened at a high school reunion party that you attended? Story 1. My sister, my now husband, and I were all in the same graduating class. Plus my husband's best friend. Best friend's name is something like John Smith. Very common. He was very popular in HS. Super nice guy. Stood out in a crowd. If you didn't know him, you certainly knew of him, even in a massive school. So anyway, the 20YR reunion rolls around. My sister is the only one who wanted to go. She called right after, very upset. Apparently there was a huge memorial wall for John Smith, who had just died. None of us knew. Awful. My husband was like, huh. But we just saw him, called him up and was like, hey dude, are you dead? No, not dead. Surprised but not dead. Anyway, it turned out the much less popular other John Smith was the one who died. They made a lovely memorial for the wrong guy who was forgotten totally. We still run into people to this day who see him and are like, hey, aren't you supposed to be dead? Story 2. Some girl confessed to cheating on her high school sweetheart, thinking enough time had passed it wouldn't bother him. She thought wrong. Edit. I just realized I spelled school edit too. Since this was so well received, I'll add some details here so that they're all in one place. The reunion was 10 years later. The two of them hadn't seen each other in years. As far as I know, they broke up shortly after high school ended. After she broke the news, somewhat nonchalantly as well, the guy flipped out and slapped her, then started screaming at her. She ran away, at which point he broke down and said something about wasting his high school years and left. We still managed to have a good time even after all that though, which was nice. And all you comedians misspelling school and saying Bob isn't cool, insert appropriately severe threat here. Story 3. Someone I knew from school tried to arrange an unofficial reunion as the school weren't going to do one. He was socially inept, so would say and do odd things, which people picked up on a lot. But his heart was always in the right place. He went to a lot of effort, but very few people responded at all. Those that did mostly made snide comments about the event behind their back, like dissing the location, etc. Some made fun of him personally too, as he was doing some admittedly odd OTT organizing. Then close to the event, he cancels and blows up, sending everyone a justified message about how they can all go eggs. And he was just trying to do something nice and wanted to catch up with people. That was received with more snide remarks too. He died unexpectedly just a few months later. Edit. This exploded, so I'll try to read all replies and answer. He died from a heart attack. He was a very large person, which seems to have contributed. I'm not sure if many people from the reunion know or not. I found out on FB as he was a friend on there. This was a 15-year reunion, so 31-year-olds, UK. I'm from the UK, so maybe our reunions here are different to US. Most of the people who didn't reply seem to be the more decent people, and coincidentally the ones who have moved away, or just moved on in their lives. Those who did were mostly the ones who still spent every week at the same bars with their same school friends. When it canceled, they all actually went out the same night for drinks but didn't invite the organizer. An OTT example of organizing was explaining the color theme of the space to everyone so they could make sure they color coordinated their outfits. Story 4. One guy had made not one but two fortunes and had a net worth of well over $100 million by our 20th reunion. High-speed modem patents in the late 1980s. Early investor in broadband. Right place at the right time. He'd already retired. On our classmate update bulletin, he listed his occupation as unemployed and unemployable as a bit of a gag. Some of the well-meaning but clueless types sought him out to offer encouragement and tips on how to find work. Story 5. My 10-year reunion killed itself before it happened. Turns out our class president, traditionally in charge of organizing, took a hard turn into a footloose character after high school. Edit. Originally said she took a hard turn for the evangelical. Several commenters objected to me lumping this brand of crazy into evangelism, for which I apologize. Highlights of her event planning include no alcohol allowed, not even BYOB. A few classmates in a reasonably successful band offered to play for free. She was adamant there would be no music or dancing, plus ones were to be spouses only. Two guys happily told her they'd bring their husbands, and she kicked them both from the Facebook page. The venue was the high school's soccer field. In Iowa, in August, we were welcome to bring our own chairs. A few people offered to bring beanbags and bocce and similar games. She said no, because it would make the reunion too much like tailgating. Suggested entertainment was a guided tour of the school, which had undergone zero change since we graduated. Catering was from Hy-Vee, which is a grocery store. Their food is actually okay, but tickets were $60. It was ultimately canceled because out of our class of 300, less than 10 people bought tickets. Edit. Wow, that's a lot of comments. Okay, FAQ. This was Eastern Iowa, Cedar Rapids, Iowa City region, which makes the sudden footloose morals all the weirder. It's a pretty liberal area. I cast no judgment on Hy-Vee catering. Put down the pitchforks. Their food is good, just not $60 worth of good. I sadly couldn't come up with the name of the band, short of messaging dudes I haven't talked to in 20 years. Looks like they haven't been active in quite a while. A bunch of people who stayed local did indeed pick a bar and a Saturday night to meet up, and had much amoral debauchery. Rumor has it there was even karaoke. It makes a good story, but I'm ultimately sad for our event planner. I got the impression that she really needed everyone to see that she was the most good person who was doing everything right, and that she hadn't been in control of something in a long time. I hope she's doing better now. Story 6. Didn't happen to me, but I had this friend who got someone pregnant back in the day, and she kept the kid. They've both been great about it. He helps financially, but that was the extent of his contribution. She married soon out of high school and met a great guy who has been the de facto dad. Either way, it's a day bring your kids if you have them event, and someone let slip that my friend is that kid's real dad. And the kid heard it and it was a fucking show. Everyone was trying to figure out who said that, and how could someone spill that secret, etc. In the end, my friend pretended he was shocked and laughed it off as a joke, which honestly I front of the kid was probably a good move. Story 7. It wasn't really bad, just odd. A guy came with full Kiss-style makeup on, white face, black shapes around his eyes and black lips. We were too awkward and polite to mention it, so everyone just chatted with him as though it was completely normal to turn up like that. Story 8. Someone told me, "You're not a failure, be yourself." And so when I went and proudly told them what I was doing these days, working a 9 to 25 HR job, going back to school, having gotten life together in a rehab and back on track, I was proud. They all pitied me, and one dude tried to give me money. It made me feel bad about my current progress. I hate people. Story 9. Not so much a span but a before. 10-year reunion for my largest school. 500 graduates per year. The plan was for the reunion to take place over Thanksgiving weekend. To help pay for the expense, raffle tickets were sent out to the entire class to sell. The reunion didn't happen. Story 10. At my 10-year reunion, the organizers were doing the thing where they give awards for the person who came the farthest to attend, the person with the most kids, etc. The award came up for who had the oldest kid, and people started shouting out their kids' ages. When it quieted down, this shy girl near the front said in a normal voice, 11. And then we all realized why we had stopped seeing Heather right before graduation. Story 11. It's been a decade since I finished school. I see an old classmate sometimes when he does maintenance work in my apartment block. About a year ago, he asked if I was going to the reunion organized by some of our classmates. I said no, because I couldn't think of anything worse and also hadn't been invited. Apparently, they organized it over Facebook, which I don't have. When I next saw him 6 months later, I asked how the reunion was, and he exasperatedly explained that it had been a real show. The Mean Girls had started planning it together, fell out, and then started each planning their own. So there was about 4 shitty tiny awkward parties and everyone was confused. Story 12. The people who were supposed to plan our high school reunion dropped the ball, so I figured it wouldn't happen. But then this other dude from our high school stepped up to plan it. He was in a graduate program and also working part-time at a banquet hall, and he said that his boss would give us the banquet hall space for free. It was a really nice gesture, and he seemed really into it. He had been miserable in high school, grumpy, sullen, unpleasant, mean to other people. He came out in college, so maybe the weight of having to keep it a secret was part of why he was so unpleasant. Maybe he'd be more fun now. I was working a job and had no savings at the time, so I was neither interested in having my former classmates pity me, nor was I gunning to shell out a lot of money to attend. Plus, my shitty ex might be there, and that didn't feel worth it. The organizer made a Facebook event and asked people to Venmo him the cost of admission prior to attending. He wanted something like $15, $20 a head, I can't remember. Anyway, it didn't really feel worth paying for. Maybe if there would be some drinks included or something, I would go for an hour. I sent him a private message asking what the admissions ticket covered. Food? Drinks? The space was free after all. He posted publicly on the Facebook page that if the cost of admission was too steep, message me and we can work out some financial aid. What? I then publicly posted, asking what the admission cost covered. No response. Other people asked too. He said it would go towards having a bartender and server dedicated to the event space, as well as towards food. Okay, fair. Folks, he was the server. My friend showed up having not yet paid him, and he barred her entry. The people who had paid the admission cost showed up to an empty banquet hall, were given a menu by their former classmate, and told to order their own food and drink from him. He pocketed the admission ticket money as his fee. After an hour, he brought out one grocery store sheet cake for 75 people to share. That was it. Story 13. My therapist encouraged me to go to my 10-year, which, in retrospect, was probably a play for job security. Edit. Oh wow. Thanks for my first awards and gold kind Reddit strangers. Story 14. At my 20-year reunion, 2 decades after high school, 2 guys got arrested for fist fighting on the sidewalk outside the bar. We went to Friday night. Why were they fighting? One of the guys slept with the other guy's girlfriend in high school and drunkenly brought up the 20 years ago fling. Neither of them married her or even dated her after high school. Those idiots got charges 20 years later for her, though. Story 15. We'd been there less than an hour, having a great time reconnecting. Suddenly, an old friend approached and said, "Is that your wife over there? She's pretty hammered." And as we watched, she tripped and fell face first, full body crash onto a 12-top table where many of my old classmates were sitting. The table broke, food and drinks flew everywhere. I walked over, scooped her up, and half-carried, half-walked her out the door. She took Xanax before going, unbeknownst to me, and was an alcoholic who started slamming drinks as soon as she got there. So, good times. Story 16. I didn't go to my 10-year, but my entire friend group did, and they all called me asking where I was. While on the phone with one of them, he goes, "Oh, Brittany is here." Brittany was a train wreck in high school and apparently hadn't changed in 10 years. She proceeded to get trashed, get in a fight with a waitress, and did meth in the bathroom. Police picked her up that night after she was found, her passed out in the McDonald's bathroom. Story 17. The high school I went to had a really big gang problem. A great many people didn't attend due to being in prison. Some of those who were in gangs in high school had worked their way through the ranks. One in particular was pretty high up. He decided to show up. It was generally peaceful, until somebody decided to stick him with a knife. Then all broke loose. The dude that got shanked was a colossal to me through all of high school, and now he's bleeding profusely from multiple stab wounds. Being an off-duty medic, I did what I do, half expecting him to bleed out on the gym floor. He didn't remember me. There wasn't that movie moment between us. I doubt he even recognized me. I just kept plugging holes and thinking I shouldn't have worn my nice shoes. Cops and EMS arrived, few people got arrested, he survived. I ended up tossing my favorite dress shoes and a really nice pair of pants because they were too blood-soaked to rescue. Story 18. Not mine, but my husband's. 10-year anniversary for high school graduates. The whole thing was really just sloppily slapped together, and it was pretty clear the class was not interested in getting together. The gathering place kept changing every couple weeks. This was updated via Facebook group BTW. At first, it was renting a place and getting food catered and whatnot. Except it's pretty typical in my town for most people not to go on to be successful by any means. So asking mostly unemployed or minimum wage workers to cough up I think $200 to attend just didn't work out. Venues kept downgrading to accommodate until they got down to having a bonfire out by the lake. BYOB, no fee, just come hang out for like an hour or something. Throughout the fiasco of finding a venue, a majority of the class declined going. Some had to change status. There was a good handful still marked as going. But with everything changing and people obviously starting to tune out midway through, a lot of people forgot to change their status of going to not going. 2 people showed up. That was it. One was my brother, who had nothing better to do anyway. Other guy that sort of helped put the crap show together showed up. The gal that set the whole thing up was pretty mad about it, and the rando dude that helped posted a long rant on the Facebook about how awful people were and how they should have appreciated the efforts it took just to hold the pathetic gathering. My husband had me sit and flip through the page after everything was said and done. It was pretty obvious the gal was in serious denial the entire time, despite it being pretty clear nobody wanted anything to do with the event. I laughed at the rant, then honestly forgot about it until I saw this thread. Edit. I failed to mention my brother and husband were in the same year. They were buddies throughout high school, college, and even now. I'm just a little younger, hence why I was not part of the reunion and my brother was. And no, husband refused to go to the reunion because clicking through Facebook profiles was enough to check on people he had any curiosity about. Plus, we had just moved states right around this time, so traveling was not on our list of to-do anytime soon. Story 19. At the after-party, the one guy getting drunk enough to think it was a great time-place to discuss race relations with one of our black classmates. Well, not so much discuss as randomly impose the topic. The cringe nearly killed us all. Story 20. 5-year reunion. One guy, always kind of a marginal figure in HS but a nice person, after some sort of discussion got his paycheck out and got loud saying, "Now do you think I'm a loser? Don't believe how much I make? Check this out." Of course, he just made things worse, and everyone was laughing at him. I mean, he had his paycheck on him? Haven't seen him since, BTW. Story 21. So far, it was the only thing that happened at my high school reunion, 10th reunion. Graduating class of plus XAR 850. Well-funded high school. Every class has a trust fund to fund reunions. A good friend of mine was our treasurer and organized it via Facebook. We started big. Ballroom. Setting for 1,000. Figured spouses, etc. A year out, lots of interest. Definitely not 1,000 people interest. Started to scale back. 6 months out, less interest. Lots of people reconnected via Facebook and lost the drive to actually care. Scaled back more. 3 months out was deadlines for attendance. The school's alumni association would dispense the funds based on class size and allotment for the milestone. We hadn't put a deposit down because the target kept moving on attendance. 2 months out, my friend finalizes and does a formal cutoff. She had kept taking anything for a month due to lack of interest. Day of, It's at a local bar. Not a small bar either. Good food. Rented the entire place for a Friday night at that. 25-ish alumni showed out of 150 RSVPs. With spouses or whatever, was around 40 people. That was the worst part, is knowing so few people actually gave a why, but the best part was the treasurer's smirk the entire night. The school had allotted $50 per person for this. $50 per person, plus guests. $15,000 with instructions to pay everything fully. We drank and ate our asses off to the point of almost being Roman, and the bill was $7,500 between food and rental. She paid the bill, then handed everyone $100 from the envelope, and then handed the rest of the envelope to the manager and was like, here's the tip. So roughly $3,000 for the wait staff and crew. Pretty memorable and honestly not that big of a bummer. But holy people just don't care. Story 22. 10-year reunion invite came up and I thought, yeah, looks like it could be fun. I noticed the venue is fancy restaurant. Disappointed, expecting some sort of party. Room is very limited. For a class of over 100, you would think they would have picked a venue with over 25 capacity. I start reaching out to all the friends I've kept in touch with. Not one of them is even remotely interested in going. My old high school best friend suggests we catch up at his and drink instead. Haven't seen him in years, so I bail on the reunion. Turns out almost no one went. One of the girls that organized the thing was begging my mate to go because she was so embarrassed how little people had RSVP'd. She ended up bailing herself. Turns out for the 10 people that actually went, half of which organized it, they had to be split up, since they booked a place that was not intended for large groups of people. Unironically, the same group that organized it took it upon themselves to organize our end-of-school formal, Aussie for prom. They decided for themselves that we didn't want to go with the original plan and completely replanned it without really consulting the general student body. So many people bailed on it that they had to start inviting ex-students. Dropped out, changed schools, expelled, take some real to get expelled from a Catholic school in Australia, just to meet the minimum capacity the venue required to move forward with the date. Honestly, I know they meant we PL, but this group ruined the formal for a lot of people. I don't know why I expected anything good from their reunion. Apparently the after-party was wild though. Someone almost got thrown off the boat, literally into the water at 2 in the morning. And a guy we know copped A in the eye. Edit. Well, this blew up. Thank you all. To answer a few questions a lot of you have asked, he woke up the next day and sat up without opening his eyes. He had been sleeping on the floor, and someone was standing over him with his out. Why was it hard? I don't know. I don't want to know. Lol. The after party was of the formal, and the after party is called the kick-ons. I'm sure the restaurant could have catered to 10 people. I assume some rocked up unannounced. If you get expelled from a Catholic school, at least in Australia, you cannot attend any other Catholic school. My school, at least, were hesitant to expel. As a result, they had told us this, but I can't remember if it was because they wanted to keep kids in Catholic schools or if it was because we were preparing for the HSC, Aussie version of finals. Edit 2. Less than 24 hours after the main question was posted, my best mate found this on one of those YouTube Microsoft Sam videos. What the actual, I'm new to this, is OP a hack? Or did he just get sniped? Story 23. Small college reunion with my core group of friends from university. This was about 5 years after graduation. We all partied pretty hard in school, but mellowed out in our late 20s. Decided to all meet up for dinner at a local restaurant. Think Applebee's, but nicer. One guy showed up already wasted, with a duffel bag full of multiple packets of weed and the bottle he started on before meeting us. He decided we were boring, finished his bottle in the restroom, and refused to come out. He ended up passing out there. Bartender kicked him out. He came alone in an Uber and we had no idea where he lived. None of us wanted to take him to our places. He was angry, puking, and belligerent. So we dropped him off at his last known address, his parents' house. Both of them answered the door, and we handed him over. It was past midnight and incredibly awkward. He's not invited to the next reunion. Story 24. My husband invited the entire party to our home. The reunion was being held at a place you know, built to hold parties. Well, the majority of the people that were invited came, so we had 100 plus crammed into a 2,500 square foot house, and a bunch of them decided to jump into our pool, which was ice cold. I was not pleased with my husband. Story 25. Went to my high school reunion. I honestly don't know why I did. The friends I kept in touch with, well, I kept in touch with. But one friend managed to convince me otherwise, and so I went. The reunion wasn't bad. It was mostly people trying their best to one-up each other in their bid to look successful. I sat down at a table next to my friend where I was actually enjoying my time catching up with long-forgotten acquaintances. During the reunion, there were 2 people who stood out the most. There was this chick that I barely recognized. My friend and I kept asking each other if she was in our graduating class or a spouse of one. Found out later that she spent close to $80,000 for cosmetic surgery, hence, being unidentifiable. She was so proud of herself that nobody was able to recognize her. Seriously, She could have been a candidate on Botched, but who was I to pop her bubble? The other was a guy who was so snooty back in high school. We're talking the cliche. If your address wasn't within a certain neighborhood, you weren't good enough to acknowledge kind of snobbery. Well, he arrived late for the dinner portion, and all the seats at his old friend's table were already taken. So he sullenly sat down with the likes of us. Yikes. Having to sit with people you looked down on all your teenage life. The poor man. So I took pity on him because most of the people at the table probably remembered his attitude as well and ignored him. I started asking him questions of how he's fared since graduation, etc. This was our conversation while the DJ was blasting music and others were yelling over the din to be heard within their own chats. Me? So what are you doing now, Snob? The name of guy was changed to protect the innocent. Snob. I work at Smith, Smith & Smith attorney law firm. Not a real company, but you get the gist. Me. That's impressive. Are you a lawyer? Studying to be a lawyer? Snob. No. I'm working on it. Me. Oh. Articling at your law firm? Snob. No. Me. You work at Smith, Smith & Smith. So what exactly is it that you do? Movie moment. I kid you not. The DJ cut the music so that the MC could make the announcement that dinner was to be served shortly. But before that happened, Snob got frustrated with all my questions and stated loudly into the unexpected silence, I'm a mailroom clerk. Everyone stared and hate to say this. Accidental justice was served. Snob was taken down a peg or two by his own hands. Story 26. At my 10-year high school reunion, we had a decent turnout, maybe 100+ people. We were at a pretty nice hotel banquet hall. There was one guy I had known all through high school, and he was a well-known stoner. I'll call him Chris for this story. I see Chris walk into the banquet hall, stop in his tracks, turn around in a very slow 360-degree circle, surveying the entire room. He just says, "Whoa," and he looks visibly alarmed. He stops, and his eyes settle on me. I say, "Hey, Chris, long time no see, man." He kind of slides over to me and whispers in my ear, "This is really weird. I'm pretty sure I know every single person in this room." And that is when I realize he is wearing the same clothes as all the banquet hall workers. Oh my God. Chris is working as a server at his own high school reunion, and he has no clue what is happening. I walk him out to the front lobby and explain it's our 10-year high school reunion. He is mortified, beyond embarrassed. He was never contacted, and didn't even realize it had been 10 years since we graduated. He just knew he was working another catering gig in a never-ending series of catering gigs. I make him take me to his manager. I explain what is happening and tell the manager there is no way this guy is working his own high school reunion. Awesomely, the manager agrees. We find a different suit jacket and tie for him, and I take Chris back to the party. He ended up having a good night. Story 27. My class never got to the reunion part. Our class president was MIA. When they tried to plan our 5-year reunion on Facebook, it devolved into people fighting over the venue and whether or not kids were allowed. Half the people wanted to get trashed and get away from their kids if they had any. The other half wanted a dry reunion in a local park with kids allowed. Our class also had no money because they spent it on stupid senior year. So people argued over whether it would be catered or a potluck and how much they would collect from everyone if it was the former. Edit. This was a fund for senior trip, prom, etc. I don't remember where the money came from. Just know it ran out. I would not have gone even if they'd managed to figure something out. Story 28. This guy slammed some worn Natty Light during beer pong, then held his wrist up to this mouth as if it were coming back up, and then he projectile vomited. The best part is that all of it somehow shot forcefully from his fingers like Spider-Man, and we webbed everyone on that side of the room with vomit. It was full of cooked onions. It was amazing. Story 29. When I was in 7th grade, this rich snob bully, John, grabbed off my head a wool scarf my mother had knitted for me. He threw the scarf into a pile of muddy leaves and jumped up and down on it. When I went home that day, my mother was furious when she saw the torn, muddy scarf. She made me tell her who did it, then she called the school principal and yelled at him. The next day, John got pulled into the principal's office and paddled. That was back when they still paddled kids. 55 years later, at our 50th class reunion, John came up to me and angrily said, "You got me into trouble in 7th grade. I got him in trouble?" And he's still mad about it, 55 years later. I said, "John, you were A in high school and you're still a..." And I walked away. Story 30. Someone confessed to me that I was his dream girl, with his fiancé, as his date to the reunion. I barely knew the guy in high school. Unfortunately for his fiancé, she didn't know anyone there and he refused to leave with her. He drunkenly said, "I'm not leaving with her, I'm leaving with you," to me. I told her to text me when their car was outside. Then I whispered, "Let's go," in his ear, walked him out, and put him in her car. I'll never forget the look on his face when he realized who was driving, and I said, "Yeah, that's how tonight is going to end." But they still got married, so. Story 31. No one came. I went to my 10-year. It was admittedly a really fucking small town, so my class was only 27 people. But only 4 people showed up and 1 was actually homeschooled. It kinda sucked. I was looking forward to seeing people and traveled from a long way away, 3,000 miles. It kind of jaded me towards my classmates. I'm not angry or anything, just a realization that there really wasn't any connection that survived. Story 32. Not high school, but one time I got invited to my college's alumni event. This was only a few years after I graduated, and I liked enough of my teachers to go just to see them. Anyway, we pull into the college and they have like 10 bouncy castles set up for the event. I'm still confused. Story 33. Damn, I was class president and didn't get invited. I was no longer living in the country and wouldn't have gone anyways, but dang, I wish I would have been invited. Story 34. Not mine, but my mother went back to her 40-year reunion last summer. In December, she left my father, 36 years of marriage, for her high school sweetheart and is now living with him. Story 35. Went to my partner's 5-year at the local Elks Lodge. He grew up in a really rich town, so it was super extravagant. Best part was the open bar until like 9 p.m. and then cash afterwards. We were all having a great time until some snuck into the basement and stole a bunch of booze. Literally, multiple boxes. When the bartenders found out at 8:30, they were furious and kicked us all out. Ruined what would have been an excellent night. Story 36. This one is just kind of depressing. My 10-year high school reunion was of course organized by the popular kids. They girls that still lived in our small hometown and were past their peak. They are really rotten people. I was actually in their group until they started bullying me in middle school. By the time our reunion rolled around, I believe, 4 of our graduating classes passed away. At one point, they had us all sit down and they dimmed the lights for a slideshow that was in memorial for one of our lost classmates. The one they were, of course, good friends with. I was so furious, I stormed out. Maybe because I was friends with another girl we lost. But how self-centered do you have to have a class reunion? And at least not do some research and have a memorial for everyone gone. Story 37. This was not my reunion, but my husband's. In high school, my husband was, and still is, a very reserved and quiet person. He tolerates no BS though. I call him my John Wayne. He is also 6 years older than I am. We arrive at the venue, and everyone is mingling. All of a sudden, a woman calls out my husband's name and runs over. He introduces me, and she loses her ever-loving mind. Apparently, she had been in love with him since elementary school, but hadn't ever said anything, and she planned on asking him on a date that night. She has no idea he was married, or that his wife, me, was 7 months pregnant. She bursts into tears and starts yelling at me incoherently. Turns out she is living with bipolar disorder, and was also an addict at that time, which is why she reacted that way. We still choose to leave less than 20 minutes of arriving. Story 38. We had a teacher in high school that told us, by the time you reach your 10-year reunion, at least one of your classmates will have died during a discussion about mortality. 10-year reunion arrives, and nobody from our class has died. Saturday night of the reunion, we're partying and having a good old time. One of the organizers gets up to the microphone and is making some announcements. She gets a blank look on her face and drops to the floor. Brain aneurysm. She was dead before she hit the floor. Story 39. I was at one not too long ago. We have a very small school, so a reunion meant a handful of high school classes getting together at the new building for our school. For a quick background, the principal at the time I was there was the daughter of the founder of the school. She was super old, and her daughter, who had daughters of her own, worked as a teacher. Anyways, all 3 generations are standing 5 feet or so from my group, and we were actively making fun of the old principal for being racist. She totally was. And I think we were loud enough to be heard. My evidence? She was constantly glaring at our group the entire rest of the night. Very awkward. Story 40. A girl took drugs with some of her friends. She started going crazy and kissed a random guy in front of his boyfriend before spitting to his face and yelling, "You small, never loved you loser." I didn't know the guy, but he cried and left the party immediately with his friends. That broke the ambiance for the rest of the night. Story 41. My mother-in-law passed away a few years ago at the age of 90. Her reunions were annual at a restaurant on the same day every year because there is 4 of them left. One day, a single person is going to show up and be all alone. Story 42. Someone who was considered a popular kid at my high school tried to organize our 10-year high school reunion on a cruise ship. Obviously, no one wanted to shell out that kind of money, so the reunion never happened. Story 43. Can't say it is the worst thing, just a general observation. My class has been excellent about having reunions every 5 years. Our 8th installment is not too far off. They are very well attended and enjoyable. The one thing I noticed is that as the reunions go by, the folks who have been putting on a show for appearance sake give fewer and fewer fucks as the years pile up. You can see who has been ravaged by years of drug or alcohol abuse. The ones who have let themselves go physically. I'm not talking being a few pounds overweight. Some folks put in no effort to be hygienic in general. Then there are the people who realize too late that when you treat people like no one wants to be around you anymore. There are talkers and big deals from HS who kept it going through the first few reunions. New cars, talking about their big houses and endless vacations. They don't talk anymore. They've maxed out their credit cards long ago and live life on borrowed time and money. Some have just given up and you can see it. I found that to be profoundly sad. We're all too young to do that. On the other hand, I see some old friends with a regular cadence. We catch up, get the lowdown on each other's families, and talk fondly about a 4-year stretch of time that happened long ago.